Okay, one of the most important as well as overlooked steps in managing pastures is walking the pastures, looking to see what's happening, and recording what's going on in the pasture. You want to look for things like any deterioration in plant quality. Are the grasses turning yellow? Or is their growth being reduced? Are the grasses being overgrazed? And document those conditions. Okay, when I talk about surveying a pasture on a regular basis, I mean just that. I don't mean just going into a pasture once a year, but set up a schedule. Maybe every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, go out and see what's happening. You can develop an inventory of plants and weeds that you see in the pasture. You can see if the weeds have changed over time. Are they more prolific this year? Do you have species this year that you didn't have last year? Another important consideration for me is to make a list of everything that's toxic in the pastures. Generally, animals avoid toxic plants, but not always. It's good to know what's out there and either eliminate things that are really dangerous or at least know what toxins produce, what symptoms to watch for in your animals, and be aware of what's there. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to a relatively easy and maybe even fun, but you got to take that with a grain of salt because you have to remember I love weeds, all right? But I think it's fun. So a very, very simple way of evaluating your pasture that will give you not just qualitative information, i.e. what's there, but quantitative. What percent of the pasture is covered by vegetation and other things. And that's by using a disc or a frisbee. With the project I worked on in Penn State, it was called an equine pasture evaluation disc or an EPED. But anything will do. Any frisbee that you find, any disc that you find in a dollar store will work. What you do is you put a line on the edge of the frisbee or the EPED, and you want to collect information unbiasedly, meaning you want to cover the whole pasture. If I look at this pasture, it's been overgrazed a little bit here, right by the barn where the horses hang out the most. Out there, the pasture grass is thick, lush, healthy. Here in the summertime, I would find more weeds. Out there, I would find fewer weeds, and maybe a different kind. So I want to make sure when I'm collecting data, I cover the entire pasture. So one way of doing that is to take something like a disc and simply walk the pasture in the shape of a W. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk this way, back that way, and then at the other end this way. And I'm going to toss this EPED as I go. If the pasture is small, an acre or less, just 10 tosses is fine. If it's a relatively large pasture, I want to collect data from at least 20 spots within that pasture. Okay, so my mark, if I look right on my mark, it's actually landed on a leaf of a weed called plantain. So my first toss was a weed. The next thing I'm going to do is heading in that direction is toss it again. All right? In this case, it's landed on bluegrass. So it's landed on grass. All right? And I'm going to continue to do that as I walk the W, covering the entire pasture. And I can tell you, I didn't expect to find plantain up here. The grass is really thick. What this does is make you really focus on what's in the pasture. It'll give you a really honest picture of what's happening out here, so it's very important. I find that if I just walk around, I see a plant that's interesting and big, and I'll go document that and skip all the small ones, might not see some of them. This makes you really look at what's growing in the pasture. All right, this is a fact sheet that goes over the directions for what I basically introduced you briefly. And it talks about what grass forage is and what weeds are and how to collect this data. All right. This is a sheet that you can use to fill in your data. And it asks you to check off grass forage on your first toss. On the second toss, weeds. Third toss, and I'm just making this up right now, we didn't actually do this, but on the third toss was bare ground, fourth toss bare ground, the fifth toss was organic matter, which is another word for manure. And then on the 6-tough legume forage would be clover, alfalfa, something the animals can eat that's not a grass. All right, so when you're all finished, what you can do is convert this to percents. If you did 10 tosses, you divide the number of tosses by 10. The number of times it landed on grass forage by 10. If you did 20, divide the number of times it landed on grass forage by 20. That will give you the percent of the time that you tossed that e-pad that it landed on grass, the percent of the time it landed on clover, the percent of the time it landed on weeds. Plant litter is pieces of dead grass, like for mowing. Bare ground is places where the horses have eaten and destroyed everything and it's just bare ground. And organic matter, again, is manure. All right, so you'll know what percent of this pasture is bare ground. If it's 40%, that's pretty darn high. You don't want that to happen. If 30% is weeds, that's pretty high too. You don't want that to happen. What you'd like to see is that grass forage is at least 70 to 80%, and legume forage is 70 to 80%. That provides some food value for your animals. So what you can use this for is actual evaluation of your pastures, to inventory the grass and the weeds that are out here. And also, if you decide to renovate, wait till next year and see how much improvement you have. How did your percentage go up for your grasses and your bare ground go down? So this is an important tool and it's fun. And if you have kids or a dog, you can play with the e-pad as well. So it's a good tool to use. I hope you enjoy it.